Italy, a land of Mediterranean warmth, rich in history and culture. At its very centre lies Umbria, where ancient paths take the walker in the footsteps of the saints, and where medieval buildings are considered almost new. This is the scenery captured by master painters over the centuries, where Roman ruins are part and parcel of the landscape and of Italian lives. Our journey starts in Norcia, typical of the Umbrian towns, and takes us at a gentle pace through rolling hills and valleys to our destination, Assisi, home of one of Christianity's most loved and celebrated saints. Nestling in its tranquil valley, the medieval town of Norcia is an ideal introduction to the special atmosphere of Umbria. Umbria is famous for its appreciation of food, and like every town in Italy, Norcia has its food specialities. Here, it's pork in all its forms. The fact that the town is here at all is a tribute to the town's ancient builders. This is earthquake country, and these houses with their thick flared walls have withstood 2 major quakes since they were built in the mid-1700s. A statue of St. Benedict dominates Norcia's piazza. This visionary churchman was born here in the 5th century. He is credited with developing the idea of religious communities and founded the first Benedictine monastery. Tomorrow, we'll leave Norcia's pleasant, relaxed atmosphere behind, but not its interest in food. For the first part of our walk, we're accompanied by Gennaro Nobili, who is going on a treasure hunt. It's not gold he's looking for, but something that can be even more valuable. Gennaro and his dogs are searching for truffles, a prized ingredient of Umbrian cuisine. Truffle hunters used to train pigs for the task, but Gennaro prefers dogs, who are less likely to eat the prize. These dogs are experts, and Gennaro is a professional.
You have 3 varieties: the Scorzoni, which is the summer one, which you find from early June to the end of August, the Uncinato, that can be found from early October to the end of November, and the black rarest one can be found from December to March. These are the different types that you can find in our area.
Leaving Gennaro and Norcia behind, we strike out towards the Piano Grande, the Great Plain. This huge basin was carved out of the limestone mountains by prehistoric glaciers, and our path leads across it to Castelluccio, a small, isolated town dwarfed by the monumental scale of the surrounding plain. Perched on a hill, it dates from medieval times and has hardly changed over the centuries. Within, it's all steep lanes and steps. What's most noticeable, however, is that the streets are almost empty. There are now only 150 people living here, and in the winter, the number goes down to just 10. There are few jobs nearby to support permanent residents, and more of the houses are being used as holiday homes. The town is almost like a living museum. Behind Castelluccio are the rolling mountains of the Monti Sibillini, rugged country roamed by wildcats and wolves. Here, it's a different type of scenery. We've entered a dramatic limestone gorge, through which flows a river fed by the surrounding hills. The road is cut into the side of the rock face, so that it can still be used in spring when the river below swells into a flood. It's an ancient road, the Via Flaminia, once a major part of ancient Rome's celebrated network of highways. It leads us on towards Spoleto. The early 19th century poet Shelley described Spoleto as the most romantic city I ever saw. And it has hardly changed since he first laid eyes on this small hill town. Spoleto has one of the richest, most violent, and longest histories of any town in Italy. The city walls already stood in the 4th century BC. Most of the stories center around this building, the Roman amphitheater. 10,000 Christians were reputedly put to death here. Then, in the 14th century, during Italy's violent civil wars, 400 people were murdered and their bodies left on the stage as an eloquent threat to the rest of the city. Spoleto's Roman origins are overlaid with the heritage of later centuries. Uniquely, the medieval shop fronts have been preserved, complete with stone counters for displaying the goods. Above the town towers a 14th century castle, the Rocca. It was once owned by a notorious family, the Borgias, among the most ruthless politicians in Italian history. Next morning we set out towards Montefalco, walking through mile after mile of olive groves. In Italy, even the trees are ancient. Some olive trees have lived to be 2,000 years old. It's the season to pick the olives, and by and large this is still done the traditional way, by hand. These trees are among the most productive in Europe. Every farm has its press, and much like the local wine, the olive oil varies slightly from one orchard to another. A paradise for connoisseurs.
Ciao.
The trail gives us a chance to take in the view over the valley. And a moment to pause before moving away from olives to another feature of the Umbrian landscape. Sunflowers are a popular crop here, one that, like olives, makes good use of the summer heat. On a hill where three valleys meet, we come to Montefalco, the Falcon's Mount. It's another historic town, with its origins dating back, like everywhere on our route, to Roman times. Montefalco is known as the balcony of Umbria, and from the lookout point, it's not hard to see why. On a clear day such as today, you can see all of Umbria. Montefalco is the holiest of all Umbria's towns. A total of 8 saints were born here. As you'd expect, Montefalco has many churches, but perhaps the most interesting, the Church of St. Francis, looks the least spectacular. On the outside, at least. Inside, though, it's another story. The walls are a riot of colour. They're covered in frescoes dating back to the 15th century and before. It's amidst this medieval splendour that we meet Luigi Gambacurta, the former mayor of Montefalco.
The
most prodigious and extraordinary masterpiece that we have in the Church of St. Francis is here, in the apse, with the frescoes of St. Francis by Benozzo Gozzoli, a Florentine painter who lived in Montefalco between 1450 and 1452.
Che soggiornò a Montefalco tra il 1450 e il 1452, che decorano per intero l'abside dell'altare.
Gozzoli's vibrant frescoes, full of colour and energy, tell how St. Francis found God and went on to create a new religious order based on humility and simplicity. Montefalco lies at the heart of Sagrantino country, an unusual local grape grown here since Roman times. The unique wine is a great source of local pride. Beyond the town, the trail winds on, through the Sagrantino vineyards, deeper into the heart of Umbria. Lying in a sheltered valley, we find the village of Bevagna, once a Roman spa. It's a restful place, positioned on the old Roman road, the Via Flaminia, and it's perfect for spending a lazy afternoon, fishing in the stream that rushes through the village. The village has hardly changed since the 13th century, by which time most of these buildings were already in place, many of them on Roman foundations. Visitors are advised to look upwards. The Church of San Michele is remarkable for its exotic carvings and gargoyles. In the streets behind the square, there are some historic craft workshops, restored and back in working order. Among them is a traditional candle maker. Just across the lane, there's a paper maker, using centuries-old machinery and methods passed down over generations. Italy was renowned throughout the Middle Ages for its fine papers, and it's a craft that's still practiced today. Nearby, there's a medieval apothecary, still using the original jars and flasks. From Bevagna, we walk to Spoleto. It's one of the best preserved Roman towns in the whole of Italy. The walls date from the era of the first Roman emperor, Augustus, 2,000 years ago. They're embellished with Roman statues, placed here in the Middle Ages. We enter through one of 3 Roman gates, the Porta Consolare, the consular gate. On the tower above it, an olive tree has taken root. It's been there something like 400 years. Spoleto is full of gardens, each one hidden away inside a courtyard. Within one of them, a group of women sits chatting and carrying on another tradition, embroidery. It's another link with the past that the townspeople are keen to preserve. We wander through charming streets, full of signs of the Roman past. Outside the courtyard, we pass through the Porta dell'Arce, a freestanding Roman arch, to enjoy the fine evening view. There, glimmering in the distance, we have a first sight of our destination, Assisi, one of the most important religious centers in Italy. The next day brings the promise of fine weather, and the morning light lends a romantic view to the gentle scenery of this milder part of Umbria. The landscape is dominated by Assisi, and the most prominent feature of the town is the vast complex of the Basilica of St. Francis, the center of the order founded by the 13th century saint. The magnificent basilica seems an unusual memorial for a saint who rejected the wealth and panoply of the church in favor of poverty, simplicity, and charity. This might be the most Christian of places, but even here, Roman remains form part of the city. In this case, a temple to the goddess Minerva. Nowadays, Assisi is flooded with tourists. Many are pilgrims, while others come just to absorb the beauties of this historic city. The basilica itself consists of two churches, one built on top of the other. The lower church, intended as a retreat for prayer and meditation, is richly decorated, its walls covered in frescoes. It contains the tomb of St. Francis himself. But the true glories are to be seen in the upper church. The 14th century frescoes by the artist Giotto are considered among the finest anywhere. In them we find the story of St. Francis and his mission to bring the medieval church back to the true values of the gospel. But this glorious church in which we see Francis ascended to heaven, clad in gold and surrounded by saints and angels, seems far from the ideas and religious ideals that set Francis apart. In order to get closer to St. Francis, we have to climb the hill behind Assisi. Here there is a shrine on a hillside that the saint would come to often. It's a beautiful, peaceful place. This is the cave where Francis would sleep and meditate. In his time, there were no buildings here, just caves and woods. Francis would walk in the woods here. This is the spot where he's believed to have given his sermon to the birds. We continue up the hill to Mount Subasio as the sun begins to set. All through our walk, Roman history has lain beneath our feet, while stories of medieval saints have given shape to every town and village. Up here, we find the open air, the setting sun, and views across this age-old landscape. A beautiful, peaceful end to our walk across Umbria.